Hi, and welcome to the Hot Seat Podcast. We're sat here in the ASFP studios in Coventry, and I'm really excited for my next guest. She is a health and well-being strategist, a mental resilience coach, and the founder of the Healed Approach. Her mission is to help professionals in male-dominated industries like construction redefine success, prioritize well-being, and without compromise or shame. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful intro.
Oh, I hope I got it all right.
Yeah, I think I'm a woman on a massive mission, so it's not easy. I always find it really, really hard to kind of describe who I am and what I'm doing and put it in a box, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's well, big part of why we're having this conversation today, because I've been following your journey on LinkedIn and on your podcast, and it's really intriguing. So, and especially in the health and well-being space and in leadership. Mm-hmm. And when you tell me, that's where you started? Were you always in the well-being and leadership space?
No. So technically the leadership space, yes, but in a different industry. So I started out, I've shared my story quite openly. I started out in education, started as a secondary school teacher, and then looking back, I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but I was one of the very few women that applied for a job that she didn't meet all the criteria for. And in my late 20s, there was a job. And I never envisaged coming out of classroom teaching at the time, even though I didn't really feel like my heart was in it. I loved education, don't get me wrong. I've always loved education. I've always loved empowering people, but I just found, the education system really, really tough. And especially as a secondary school teacher in Manchester with, teaching languages, it was a tough gig. It was a tough gig. And I look back and I think if I knew then what I know now, I'd have been, far better equipped to support those kids that I was teaching. But anyway, I digress. I went for a promotion very early on in my career, wasn't qualified for it, but got it. And that took me into the inclusion and diversity, really. So I ended up working with schools across Lincolnshire. So I went back to Lincolnshire, worked for the local authority, working with schools, with head teachers, with initial teaching training providers, so colleges and universities, to look at how they could improve inclusion and diversity across curriculums, etc. Worked a lot with, obviously, with senior leadership teams, worked a lot with the communities that we were working with, were traveller communities, ethnic minority communities, asylum seekers, refugees. So it was a big mission, it was breaking down barriers. It was, looking at ways that we could, make children and families feel safe and included. And a big part of that is what I'm still doing now. And then anyone who's ever worked for the public sector will know, you get I think there was various restructures, and I ended up with two jobs, really. So the role I was doing was a leadership role, but I wasn't managing people. So I was leading strategy. At the time, it was national strategy. I was leading strategies in schools, but I wasn't managing people. But then after having my first son, Luca, was basically told, right, now you're you're being promoted and you've got to create a team from scratch. You've got to set the vision, set the purpose,
still within education.
Process, still within education. Yeah. So basically I was still going out doing this, because basically they'd made everybody, at the time what they did is they made everybody apart from me and one other girl redundant that were on our level, let's say, and then they assimilated different people from different parts of the county into a new service, and I was to head that service. And it was a tough gig because I was the youngest. I'd just come back. At the time I was really struggling with things that were going on in my personal life. I was a new mum, and it was really, really tough. I really had to prove myself. I made all of the mistakes that I now talk about, and it was the beginning of my journey in leadership as it is now, I guess. Yeah. So I did that until having my second son. And behind the scenes, like I said, there was not a very healthy marriage, let's say. And I was struggling with anorexia, postnatal depression. And I had a breakdown after having my second son. And it was at that point where I was like, I can't carry on. I can't carry on in this toxic workplace
Yeah.
And I can't carry on also in this toxic relationship. So I was like, right, I need to get out of both. Anyway, fast forward, and I set up a business. It was still leadership, but it was leadership and wellbeing.
Yeah.
So it was working with directors, business owners, CEOs on a one-to-one basis, looking at how they can, tackle their wellbeing and, and become better leaders. So interestingly, and I don't think everybody knows this, is that just before I set up the business, after I'd had the breakdown, I was like, right, what am I going to do? I felt like I was broken, I felt like I knew there was always this burning passion inside of me to do more. And I've always felt ever since I was a kid that there was, I was here to do something. I didn't know what it was.
So would you say that was the turning point in your life that led you down this path to where you are now?
100%. And I think, it took me a while to rebuild myself. I went back and I retrained in nutrition. So I'm also a qualified nutritionist. That's because I kind of thought, right, if I want to do wellbeing, what angle do I take? At the time as well, I was obviously, still struggling. I'll be honest, as much as I say that I was recovered from anorexia at that point, I don't think I was. I don't think I ever really truly recovered from that until I, was out of the relationship that I was in. And then so it just kind of grew and evolved from there, to be honest. I started out as leadership and wellbeing. Construction kind of happens because I just went to an event one day, got a contract with a construction organisation, and then it just grew from there. And then as I got into construction, I realised that it needed the skills that I had. And then as I got my confidence back, I realised that actually, much of my skills and my ability lay in the inclusion and diversity space and the leadership space. So that's how it's kind of grown and evolved.
Yeah.
That's a long story short.
No, thanks for sharing that. And I want to touch on that a bit more, actually. You're in the leadership space, you're helping, kids or children or with diversity and inclusion. And then you suffer a breakdown, burnout, suffering with anorexia. You have a family and you have to look after your family. You have to work and look after yourself, right? How did you navigate that? How did you come out of that? And then not just that, but how did you end up deciding, I'm going to heal myself, but I want to help others as well?
Very good question. And, I was driving here today and a song came on the radio and it reminded me of, it would have been 8 years ago, maybe, when I was driving to work. And I remember I was on a bypass, similar to a bypass today, and I was in the process of making the decision to leave my ex-husband. I was struggling at work, didn't know what to do. And I remember just crying and crying and crying. And, and I had to get my game face on because I think I was going into a team meeting that I had to lead. And I just, at that point, there was always a belief and a knowledge that it was going to get better. I just didn't know how. Right. And so it's so funny because I was driving along today and I was like, I'm in the driving seat now. I'm going to do something that is amazing. I'm really excited about, and 8 years ago when I was thinking like this, I was worried about my kids and I'm not having to worry about, going home to a, not a very pleasant environment. My kids are good. And I just thought, I'm just so pleased that I kept that faith and that belief. And I think that's what it is, I can't, I think it's just been a series of decisions that I've made and a series of, listening opportunities that the universe has given me that I've taken. There is no one way. There is no one formula. I've just always believed that it will get better and somehow I would be where I needed to be. So when I decided that, I needed to kind of get out and break free and whatever, I distinctly knew that I needed to help other people. It was just something I was like, I haven't been through. So the anorexia, the marriage, etc., that is all kind of a result of also a very traumatic childhood. There was lots of abuse, there was lots of trauma in childhood. And so I'd spent like almost 40 years of my life navigating, being in fight or flight mode. And I just thought, there is a reason for this. There is a purpose. Like I say, I didn't know why or what, but I also knew at that stage, though, that in order to help people, I had to help myself. So my healing came from, well, one, being a mother and wanting to be the best role model to my kids, and two, knowing that if I didn't get my shit together, there was no way I was ever going to help anybody else. So it was a bit of a parallel journey to begin with. And I feel like that's where, you know, I went back and I retrained and I started off small. And now I feel like I've kind of regained my power and I've rebuilt myself. Don't get me wrong. There's still a lot to do and there's still a long way to go. But it was just always listening to that thing inside of me that, you know, that was just always telling me, keep going, keep going, keep going.
And that to me shows a lot of resilience and endurance on your part. And I suppose when you step forward into the industry and you're dealing with leaders and leadership, does that resilience come out in the leaders that you talk to on a daily basis?
Yes and no. It's interesting because obviously I chose to work in male-dominated spaces, you know, because I wanted to see women rise. And I think what I do see is what really frustrates me is that I see a lot of leadership that's teetering on the edges, right? And it's like we know what we've got to do and we know how we've got to approach things, but we're not always going to do it. And I feel like that's where I kind of come in. Where there is no resilience, where there is no kind of hope, let's say that sounds awful. Yeah. I'm never going to be there. I'm never going to be working with those people because they're always going to be close to my approach and my way of doing things. So luckily, kind of, you know, the people that I attract, the people that I'm attracted to are usually the ones that have got the seeds there. They just need to potentially work with somebody and be supported by somebody who kind of gets it. Yeah. And it's a two-way thing, okay? And I feel like, because again, the resilience thing, I think it's not a black and white concept, right? One day I'll be resilient, the next day I won't. The next day I will be, you know, exhausted, crying into my cup of tea, and you know what I mean? So this is what I mean as well, is that resilience isn't something that you just have and that's it. It's a bit like confidence. You don't just have it and that's it for the rest of your life. It's something you constantly got to work on. It's something that you constantly have to be aware of. And to be honest with you, it comes from being brutally honest with yourself and with the people around you, I think.
What do you think is the cost of that? So, you know, I like what you said. So I don't work with anybody. I work with people who have the same dream and vision as myself. So we can actually work together. Yeah. But
that's through experience.
That's through experience. Yeah. But if you're looking at people in the leadership space, right, what is the cost to them for not being blinkered, put it that way?
Oh, massive. And I think I hear excuses all the time. Okay, there are constantly excuses in this industry and also the same in the previous industries and the other industries. Because I've worked in other industries. I've also worked in the automotive industry, you know, when I first started the business, manufacturing. I worked in the medical industry as well. So I've worked in different spaces and the challenges are all very similar. But the cost is massive. At the minute, we're struggling with a skills gap. You know, not just in construction, but across the board. We're struggling with meeting sustainability targets, right? We kind of agreed, what was it, in 2019? Was it the Paris Agreement or was it, I can't remember the dates now, but I know, was it put into legislation? Net zero was put into legislation in 2019, I think. The Paris Agreement was before. But anyway, basically, we have put into law that we are going to keep global warming below 2 degrees and do everything we can to keep it at 1.5. Well, we're nowhere near on track. You know, we're on track for more like 4 degrees, right? And for me, this isn't because we haven't got the technology. This isn't because we haven't got, you know, things at our fingertips. But what we are struggling with is that leadership piece. That the cost to me is that there's lots and lots of talk and not enough action. Okay, and it's for me that's why you know, the skills gap, sustainability, you know, inclusion and diversity. It's just, again, lots of people wanting the illusion of sustainability, the illusion of inclusion, the illusion that apprenticeships are working, but really behind the scenes, we all know that they're not.
I keep going back to your story about what you went through. It's an amazing story. And I just have one more thing to touch on with regards to that. It's with leaders in different industries, avoiding certain things, especially understanding the health and well-being space, you know. What would you say to young people who are trying to get into any industry? But let's talk about construction because that's what we're about right now. Who are suffering from different health and well-being issues, and not getting that support from their lead, their managers, their bosses?
That's a really, really good question. And I do as much work as I can in this space. I'm on, the advisory board for degree apprenticeships at Roehampton. I'm involved in education, the school education thought leaders movement as well. And, I'm constantly, I was talking last week to some construction graduates. I did a workshop for them at the Sustainability Community conference in Leeds. And I think I would always say it's about younger people probably doing what we didn't do and being honest and true to themselves, and trying to find those organisations or those leaders within those organisations that do get them and that can build on that. So, and for example, at this conference that I was at last week, and there was a graduate. I think a lot of the things that I said to him really resonated. And he said to me, he said to the group, he said, when we've got a board meeting, or when we've got a meeting and we've got the senior management around the table, nobody is as open and as honest as when they're not around the table. And we spoke a bit about recruitment and all sorts. And he said, you know what, Rebecca? He says, I am going to go back and I'm going to start asking some of these questions. I'm going to start asking why we're not doing this. I think he talked a little bit about recruitment as well. And that's exactly it. Okay. I would always say, find people within your organisation you can talk to and then challenge. It's really difficult as well, because I think that with anybody, and one of my podcasts was released today, and I interviewed somebody who left the NHS to come into construction, and I think again it's like, be careful about where you put your energy. Okay, so if you're in an environment where you can see no way out, it's kind of toxic to the core, which exists. Okay, then look elsewhere. Go put your energy elsewhere. Don't become a victim, to the system, if that makes sense. Because again, I feel like, within most of the organisations that I've worked in, there may be struggles, but there is usually somebody or a group of people that do get it. So empower those people, have conversations with those people, challenge, be curious. That's another big one. I always say to the younger generation, be curious. Don't accept things just because that's the way because for me, this is how we're going to create change. Okay, we're going to create change because the younger generation are going to go, well, why are we accepting that this is just the way it is? It doesn't work anymore. Let's move things forward. Let's have and when I say challenge, I don't mean do it in a confronting way. Do it through conversation. Do it through in a safe space.
Do you think that more people aren't speaking up because of an element of shame that people might judge me?
Yeah,
and this is a barrier to things actually progressing.
100%. Again, I openly have the conversations that I hear people having behind closed doors, right? I do it on my LinkedIn, I do it on my podcast, I do it in the rooms that I'm in. Because I know that the things I'm talking about and the things I'm trying to bring to the surface they're not things no one's ever spoken about. They're not things no one ever talks about. But we tend to do it in silos. We tend to do it, in safe spaces. And all conversations always have to start in safe spaces. But until we start shedding a light on some of these conversations. But I think to come back to what you're saying, I'm trying to answer your question here, is that people will have that conversation behind closed doors, but then they don't want to have it in an open space, in an open forum, because of the shame and the judgment. Absolutely. And it's something that I've had to overcome myself to be able to be as vocal as I am about things. But I feel like I always say to people, if there is something that that needs to change, don't just talk about it behind closed doors and carry on. Remember that you raising it, you're not just doing it for you, you're doing it for everybody else. And I say this is, as well to women, if you want to empower other women, I mean, we are empowered. I hate that, I hate saying we're already empowered. But if you want to encourage and support other women, you need to, call out things and not just accept them because you're worried about being judged. Because it's about, I'm insignificant in all of this, right? And my fear of shame, my fear of judgment really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. However, I can leave a legacy if I cast that kind of that unconscious bias or whatever it is that is creating that judgment, that fear of judgment, I can create change. I can create a movement. I can leave a legacy.
I think you are on the cusp of that, because I mean, your story is everywhere. Your stories, your presence is felt on across LinkedIn, across your website, across your podcast. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you. And what I want to say is that my story's not unique. When I share my story, there is always somebody, whether it is the eating disorder, whether it is the struggles at work, whether it is, the vulnerability I show when it comes to my parenting, whether there's something in my story that everybody will resonate with, because I'm only human. Yeah. Okay. And I share, and some people, my mum, she has a massive issue. Why do you share all that stuff? Why? And I'm like, because that's how I connect with people. Mum, that's how I'm going to make a difference. Like, I did a video the other day, and I can't remember what it was on. I was struggling with something, and people go, "Why are you sharing that?" I'm like, I'm sharing it so that people know. I mean, that there's a way out, yeah. And that life doesn't have to be like that. And that's where this all started, right? Was that number one, there was something inside of me that was like, this is not my story. This is not how I'm going to live the rest of my life. This is not what I'm here to do. And I know that there are lots of people out there like me that feel the same, but are so stuck in the system, so conditioned by society, so afraid of being judged, that won't. And I can't achieve what I want to achieve on my own. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I need to bring people together that feel it.
And I can attest to that, right? So I've actually never shared my story as well. So I'm from the Caribbean. A very proud Caribbean man, put it this way. I've been in the UK for quite a long time, and it's probably 15 years ago now. I had a breakdown. Wow. Okay. It started off quite simple as work-related stress. I didn't see it. I was told, you're not the same, Olando. Go to the doctor and give them this list of your behaviors. And we had the conversation. Stress. Based on what you're saying to me, it's work-related stress. You need some time off. Speak to my boss. Don't worry. Give it a couple of weeks and the big boss is going to be on holiday. 2 weeks is gone. Then another 2 weeks, another 2 weeks. And the next thing I know, I've broken down. I didn't know where the last half an hour went in a conversation with media people. And I was signed off for a couple of months. And I didn't believe or understand, breaking down or depression. Yeah. I'm like, what do I have to be depressed about? There are kids in the world who have no food, they're dying. Yeah. And I'm depressed, and I couldn't leave my room for like a week. I'm like, I'm the worst father in the world. I couldn't tell my dad because I was ashamed of it. If what you're doing now was available back then, I might have healed a lot faster.
Well, and by the way,
your opinion.
Yeah, no, and thank you for sharing that, because that's very brave to do, and I think that's exactly it, isn't it? And that's almost why, or one of the other reasons why I do it too. And because I always think there were so many times when I've thought, if only I'd have seen or known some of the things that I talk about and do now back then too, and we don't. I mean, what is really interesting about your story, or what really struck me, is that there were signs there were things that could have avoided, but
leadership, it failed.
Well,
it failed me big time.
I see this day in and day out, even in those organizations that you think are amazing, right? I even for me as well, that kind of taking time off, because you become a number, you're stuck in a system, you have time off, and you have time off for really relevant reasons, and then you're put into the conveyor belt of, well, now you're going to have a disciplinary, now you're going to have a warning. I'm talking to people all of the time. I did a post recently, and I need to share the results of it, actually, I think, because I haven't done it yet. But I did a post asking LinkedIn who feels that they can take time off due to a mental health related reason. And I think it was...
I would be really interested to see the results of that.
19% of people said that they would have the conversation. 19%. That means 81% of people would not have that conversation and would not have time off for fear of being judged. It was the same for me. I there were things that my employer did know that were going on, because there was no hiding it. But there were so many things that I battled on with behind closed doors, and then it was like there were times, and I'll be honest, especially towards the end, where my performance was questioned, and probably rightly so in the end, because I was so damaged by the way I'd been treated that and that was hard for me, because I was always really passionate about what I did. I was always really passionate about inclusion, about breaking down the barriers for the minority communities I was working with, but I was really beaten by the system. And and it's a shame as well, because also bringing to that later on, realizing I had ADHD, I had all these ideas, and like I said, I came into that job so full of passion and energy. And my manager, she was my manager for a long, long time. She saw that, right? But I was stuck in this bigger system that couldn't allow that to thrive and to grow. And I always say this as well now. Sorry, I know we're going on a tangent, but I always say now to businesses as well: don't be afraid to unlock the entrepreneurial spirit in your people. Because that's where you're going to, you're really going to get them on board. You're really going to get them working for you because they want to work with you, not because of the paycheck at the end of the month. And again, I speak to a lot of people, especially founding directors or owners of businesses, say, well, I can't hand this over because I'm never going to have anybody who is really invested in the company as much as me.
Or do it exactly the way I do it.
Well, yeah, exactly. And again, there's two things there, isn't there? There's one, maybe it's a good thing that somebody else is going to look at it, because probably the way that you're doing things, there probably are things that could be done better. That's where the diversity comes into it. But also it's the whole, well, you look after your people, you unlock their potential. They will work for you just as hard as, if not harder, for you in the long run. So it's never it should never be no one's ever going to do the right. Again, this comes down to leadership. It comes down to leadership and culture within an organisation.
Yeah. And what you said as well is owning your story. I mean, yes. I've been reading through your stuff, is if people start owning their story, like I just owned my story. I mean, my close friends know about it, my family know about it, but I've never shared this. And you've given me confidence in a way to own my story and share that. And I'm hoping that other people can actually do the same thing.
And you know what, Olando? Not everybody will, and that's okay. I think what I'm trying to do is connect with the people, the leaders out there that can do that. And that want to, really, because for me, when we can own our story, and not everybody has to be as open and honest as me, that I'm not expecting that. But I think when leaders can lean into that, lean into their failures as well. I always talk about, and I work with organisations to create cultures where failure is okay, and failure is learning, and failure is how we grow and evolve as a company. My mission is to kind of really get the true leaders out there to really lean into it and own who they are and own their stories as well. I have this thing, whenever I look at leadership within an organisation, it's what I always trying to do is try to get leaders to really go within and really, like you say, own your story. We keep saying that, but own their story, understand who they are, become self-aware, because I'm really sick of, every qualification under the sun I could whilst I could. In the leadership and coaching space. And it's always, now don't get me wrong, I learned a lot from them. I learned a lot about how to manage people. Yeah. I didn't necessarily learn how to lead people. And there's lots of theories out there. There are lots of models that you can kind of, base your leadership style on. But I always say, don't ever fit yourself into a box. The way you lead is going to be very unique to you and the people you are leading. So I'm trying to kind of bridge that gap of leadership.
And do you think it's tied to cultural norms within the business? Because you have leadership and then you have culture.
Yes.
And sometimes they clash. Is there a way we can actually look at the cultural norms within each different business? Obviously, each one will be different.
I mean, leadership and culture are obviously intrinsically linked, aren't they? And I think culture is it's one we talk about a lot, and I think that we all have different interpretations of what it really means and what it looks like. But fundamentally, culture it's your people, isn't it? It's how your people interact. It's how and I think it always has to start at the top. Okay, and this is what I mean. If you lead in a certain way, that's going to define the culture that you create. But one thing I always say as well, and this potentially comes back to your question about younger people. I mean, I could talk on any of these topics at length, right? But I think, a lot of people say it has to start at the top down, right? And I do, and I always try and when I'm working, when I'm pitching my services, let's say, I always say this has to start. I have to work with the leadership team. However, having said that, I do believe that that if you're working within an organisation and you feel that leadership is broken and isn't doing the right thing, don't just if there's if you really feel that it's just a constant uphill battle and it's having far too much of an impact on your mental health, get out, right? Please, all the time I hear it's the same in relationships. I hear it all the time. I can't leave my partner because, financially I can't. Well, Jesus Christ, I thought I was going to lose everything, Don't make that excuse. Or, I can't leave the business. I can't leave this coach, the person that I'm working for because how am I going to pay my next bill or whatever? Again, I've defied all of that. I had no really solid backup plan in any of it. I just thought, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to believe in myself enough to make this work. You can still create change from within the organisation. You don't have to wait for the leadership to shift. You can start creating the movement within the organisation, and then eventually it will filter up.
I think you're right 100%, because I've always, for myself, I've always been the one who wants to do charitable stuff, do activities, team activities. And I mean, the company I work for now, everyone's always willing, but no one really wanted to take that little lead and say, oh, come on, let's get together and do it. And now when they see me coming, not because I'm in marketing, they're like, oh, does he have a camera? Is he going to get me to do something?
Yeah.
And put people out of their comfort zone just a little bit. And eventually, not everyone, but eventually most people will be like, oh, I don't mind this.
Yeah.
This is actually nice. Looking back at myself, we just, a couple of weekends ago, we just did the Total Warrior challenge for a charity. And there were 16 of us, and there were people there who, if you asked me would they be doing it, I would say no. But they gave it a go because they wanted to be part of this whole team. And the change comes from, let's say, small beginnings sometimes.
And I love that as well, because I think, true leaders do push their people out of their comfort zone. I remember. So.
Oh, thanks. I felt like that's that directed at me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, you are, you wouldn't have shared your story. You wouldn't have me here if you weren't, and what I want to say as well is going back to before is again, it's okay because we need leaders, and we need people that aren't leaders within an organisation as well. Do you know what I mean? But what I'm trying to do is show that, that we just need leaders out there to step up, right? Because that's how we create change, and that's how we, create cultures and environments that, are healthier, are more profitable, are more sustainable. And when I talk about sustainability, I mean that in a holistic sense. But I want to talk about when I was when I was leading the team that I was leading in the local authority, and I had a team of people below me and that weren't necessarily, or didn't believe they were qualified, let's say, to do some of the things that I was doing. So to do kind of the leadership stuff, the workshops, etc. in schools. And I remember I was like, well, I'm going to make them. I was like, I'm going to make them step up. I'm going to make them do, there are certain things I will need to do and I will do, but I'm going to create a team that can do. I've shown I can do it. I want them to step up and see that they can do it. It's not, this is the thing, right? Working for the local authority, there was a very hierarchical structure. If you're on this grade, you can't do this work, right? And I was like, stuff that. Just because they're not on my grade doesn't mean to say that they can't do the work that I'm doing, because I know they can, right? It caused, as you can imagine, it caused chaos, because Rebecca just don't want to do the work. She's delegating to us because she's lazy, etc. And I don't know if they still think that now to this day. I know some of them don't, because it was like, I got them doing things. I got them out of their comfort zone. I got them doing things they never thought they would ever do, you know? Because I remember it was like, well, we're not qualified teachers. We're not this. We can't go in and do X, Y, Z. Yeah, you can.
Did you get them doing the healed approach? Right.
No, the healed approach was a little seed deep within me at that point.
Well, can you share a bit more about the healed approach?
The healed approach is the podcast.
Right.
The healed method is my signature program, let's say. So, which one do you want me to talk about?
The healed approach.
My podcast.
Yes.
So I started. God, I'd say it was almost 2 years ago now. What are we in, June? Yeah. It was 2 years in August. And I hadn't left my job at that point. But I was kind of breaking into, not breaking, I was already doing some work in construction, but I was like, right, what I want to do is bigger than this. And I was talking, I was creating, my following was growing on LinkedIn, and, you know, and people were starting to notice me, but I also people weren't really understanding what it was that I was trying to do, I think. Because again, like I said to you, I can put posts out there, they're interpreted in a certain way because of a person's experience, background, you know, personality. I could do videos. So I started doing videos, but again, never really was getting the message out the way that I wanted it. So I was like, right, I'm going to do a podcast. And I toyed around with it in my head for ages. I was like, oh, you can't do a podcast. You don't know. You've got no idea about how to, you know, interview people. You've got no idea about how to use technology. I was like, where do I, and who do I even interview? But inside of me, I was like, I need to do a podcast because I need to have real, raw, honest conversations, and conversations people can listen to for 40, 50 minutes if they need to, rather than listen to a 60-second on LinkedIn, right? And I remember at the time I had a coach. I was like, I'm going to start a podcast. And he was like, okay, Rebecca, okay. Well, let's plan this out. Don't jump in. Let's think about this. Think about, let's work. Well, I went to bed one night. I woke up the next morning. I was like, the healed approach is born. And I think that week I did my first podcast. And I did it without anything. The first one I did without anything. I didn't have a microphone. I literally researched some recording platforms. I think we've spoken. I used Riverside. Yes. Literally downloaded it that day and started. I was like, who wants to come on my podcast? It's got to be a female leader, right? Or, and that was it. It just was born. And then I think a couple of episodes in, I was like, the sound quality is terrible. So I got myself a cheap Amazon microphone and was doing it out of my kitchen at the time. Then I did have an office. So I was doing them out of my office, but I was doing them all online. And I was like, right, okay. And then I got some really great guests on.
Yes, and I've listened to most of your podcasts so far.
Oh wow, there's over 100.
Well, maybe not that many.
Yeah, because they go back. But so I went on like this massive like recording mission, and I was just recording them, and do you know what? I think it was it started as something to raise the profile of what I was doing, get the conversations out there, but also as well, there was a mission behind it in terms of kind of raising the profile of women in the industry as well. Initially, I was like, I really want to get women on to talk about the barriers that they've overcome to be in the positions that they're in, because again, I don't think that gets talked about enough, and it ties into the resilience and how, for me as well, I think the best leaders out there are the ones that have been through. And I spoke about this.
The ringer.
Yeah, exactly. I do, because it teaches you so much. And we've all got a story. There's not many people out there that haven't had some kind of battle, right? Or struggle. And anyway, so I carried on. And then as the podcast grew, I was like, right, okay, I'm having conversations because, deep down, I really want to see, obviously, women rise in every industry. But I realised that by only having women on, I was kind of, creating this divide. So I was like, I've got to get men on to talk about, I need to have these conversations with men and women. So then obviously I started to have men on the podcast, and it's just kind of grown and evolved. And, I'm also looking at kind of taking the healed approach into an in-person networking thing. But anyway, that's another conversation. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it was literally the end of last year. And I was like, right, this podcast has taken up a lot of my time. It's great. I've had some great people on. I've had some brilliant conversations, but the quality isn't great. I'm doing it still on a really rubbish old Mac with not a very good microphone. I either leave it where it is and use that content and just repurpose that content. I've done 100 odd episodes, or I take it to the next level. And I was like, I'm just going to put something out there. I'm going to put something on LinkedIn and I'm going to see what the universe does. And yeah, then someone got in touch with me. Was like, really want to help you, Rebecca. Want to help you produce your podcasts. I've got a studio. And then it just, from January this year, I've started to do them in person, in a studio. And it's just kind of, and it's just, that's had a bigger impact because all of a sudden it's much higher quality, like today, you know, and it's, yeah, it's kind of, it's
impactful. I enjoy what I've seen so far. I really enjoy it. And how does that actually, or is there any connection to the healed method, or is that totally different?
No, they're not. There's always a thread. So the healed, the healed approach has become a great place for me to make connections and to, become more visible, which then hopefully leads to me being able to do the healed method in more places. So the vision for the healed approach is for it also to be a platform for people to go to and it to complement my training and to complement the workshops that I do. So eventually as well, I want to create some of the episodes. I want to have some more case studies on there. I want to, and there's still already some things that I can work with, but basically I want to create a CPD, a bank of CPDs. I want to have, so at the minute I'm still working on it, but I want to kind of like on my YouTube, I want to have different topics, different subtopics so people can go in and access the things that mean something to them. So no, it's a library of content that one, it helps to keep my training and my coaching and my workshops up to date because I'm having conversations with people on the ground all the time. And two, it's become a source of information and a tool that complements the healed method. So the healed method is my way really of looking at how we can improve leadership within the industry. And it's a program, it's a signature program with a series of training and workshops that I kind of tailor to an individual organisation and deliver within an organisation. My emphasis, I've kind of gone around the houses, I've done lots of things. The emphasis really is on the training and the workshops because I'm a one-woman band. Now, I do coaching. I can do coaching. I do mentoring. I do mentoring for young people in the industry as well. But there's only so much I can do. And I think until I grow, and I do eventually want to grow and have a little bit of a team. I can do more of the coaching and stuff, but at the minute I want to have as big an impact as I can. And I think the workshops and the training really help leaders to then think about, and I can support leaders obviously with strategy, but then really it's about, right, she's sparked an idea. She's given us some motivation. She's made us think differently. This is now what we're going to do. So that's the idea.
That is an awesome combination of things.
We'll see. It's early days.
Yeah,
it's early days.
But again, the trajectory that you're on at the minute, I can see it happening. So,
and I will be really honest with you as well. It's not easy. It's really not easy. I'm trying to do things differently in an industry that's always done things the way it has. Throw in there being a woman. It's hard for anybody in this industry. But the added layer of being a woman in an industry that's been very, male. I hate the word male dominated. I don't know what else to use. Male intensive. I'm still fighting with that. When I first was thinking about names for the healed method, for the healed approach, I was like, oh, fully healed. I'm going to call it fully healed. Play on my surname. And then I was like, I can't do that. I cannot do that because that is just, it's hypocritical because I don't think you're ever fully healed. I think you're always on a journey. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I still feel like I have to prove myself more because I'm a woman. Again, it's it is because of the environments I'm in. Two, it is because of my own conditioning. So it's a two-way thing. Two, I feel like I can't charge as much as a man. Again, one, is because as a woman, there is this unconscious bias sometimes in the industry. And two, it's also my own condition again, in that I can't charge as much. And I talk about this sometimes to people and people go, oh, that really surprises me about you, Rebecca. And I'm like, no, well, it shouldn't, because I'm still a work in progress. And I still have my days where I think...
We all are, I suppose, yeah, as you said.
Yeah.
Well, Well, I could continue this conversation all day.
Yeah, me too.
But before we wrap up, and I want to thank you so far for everything that you've contributed to this
No,
conversation.
thank you for the opportunity.
I want to wrap up with what I call rapid fire reflections.
Oh, gosh.
Right.
Oh, gosh. I'm not good with rapid fire. Have you noticed?
So we're going to try and keep it short and sweet. Just 4 questions, right? One myth about resilience that drives you mad.
I think probably the one that I've already touched on, in that we think it's something that you master and that's it. But I think it's something that you're always working on and building on and growing.
Brilliant. The book you would recommend the most.
There's a few, but I think the one that's come to mind straight away is the Watchman's Rattle.
Watchman's Rattle.
Yeah, really, really, really interesting book that talks about, human behaviour and why we're doing the things that we're doing and how we're on the cusp right now of being able to kind of, really, make a difference and make a change. But are we going to do it or not? I don't know. But watch it. It's great.
I'll get
I
the
read
link.
it, sorry.
I'll get the link and I'll put that in.
I can't remember who wrote it, sorry, but it's the Watchman's Rattle, yeah.
Okay. What is one quote that you live by?
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Nike.
Sorry, I'm not yet. No, just do it. Honestly,
Just do it.
just do it.
Yeah.
Believe in yourself and just do it.
Okay. And finally, one thing leaders should stop doing immediately.
Oh, one thing leaders should stop doing immediately. God, there's lots of different.
Let's do 2 then, because there's so many. Well, you can do 2.
Well, I think the first thing is not creating enough space for themselves, right? I think that as leaders, we take on far too much. We have a responsibility, but we take on too much responsibility, and we feel like we've got to be doing 1,010,000 things. And one of the biggest mistakes I see leaders make is not creating enough space to kind of not just to do the work that I'm talking about, but to do the work to be able to really lead effectively, create the space to be able to lead effectively, and not being vulnerable enough. Yeah, definitely. That's my number 2.
Rebecca, I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for your strength and your resilience. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And for all those who are listening and anything that resonates with yourself, please connect with Rebecca. She's on LinkedIn. Look at her podcast or listen to her podcast. Look at her website. I'll put all the information in the bio. Please follow the Hot Seat podcast and stay tuned. Look out for what's coming next. Thank you.
Thank you.